The day Patricia Henderson took a chainsaw to our 180-year-old oak tree, she didn't just destroy a living monument. She crushed every memory my wife and I had built beneath its ancient branches. But karma, like the roots of that magnificent tree, runs deeper than anyone could imagine. Subscribe to find out how a $200,000 tree turned an HOA president's life upside down and taught her that some things are truly priceless. I traced my fingers along the rough bark of our heritage oak, remembering the day Sarah and I first saw it. As an environmental lawyer, I've defended countless trees, but this one was different. This wasn't just any tree. It was a survivor from the Civil War era, its branches stretching over our backyard like protective arms, sheltering generations of families before us. "James, it's perfect," Sarah had whispered that day, her camera already capturing the way sunlight danced through its leaves. My wife, the botanical photographer, saw more than just a tree. She saw our future. Weekend brunches under its canopy, the string lights we'd hang for summer parties, the tire swing our future kids would play on. The real estate agent had called it the crown jewel of the property, and she wasn't exaggerating. The oak's history was documented in county records, planted in 1843 by one of Denver's founding families. It had survived droughts, blizzards, and urban development, its roots growing deeper as the city grew around it. That history, combined with its perfect health and massive size, made it worth well over $200,000. But to us, it was priceless. We bought the house without hesitation, despite its need for renovations. The Victorian craftsman wasn't much to look at back then, but Sarah and I saw its potential. What we didn't see was a storm brewing in the form of our HOA president, Patricia Henderson. Patricia was what you'd get if you crossed a drill sergeant with a real estate agent and gave them too much time on their hands. Her silver-streaked hair was always perfectly styled, her designer clothes immaculate, and her smile as artificial as the flowers she insisted everyone plant in their front yards. She ran the Highland Park's HOA like her personal fiefdom, and our tree, apparently, was an offense to her sensibilities. Our first clash came 3 months after we moved in. I was in my home office, reviewing a case about wetland preservation, when Sarah burst in, her face flushed with anger. "Look at this." She thrust a letter in my face. Official HOA letterhead, Patricia's signature at the bottom. The letter claimed our oak tree's leaves were creating excessive debris and reducing neighborhood property values. It demanded we remove the tree within 30 days or face fines. I laughed at first, the kind of laugh that comes when something is so absurd you can't take it seriously. She can't be serious. This tree predates the HOA by over a century, but Patricia was serious. Dead serious. The next day, she appeared at our door, armed with a folder full of HOA bylaws and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, looking past me into our living room, "I trust you received my notice about the tree situation?" "Patricia," I matched her formal tone. "That tree is older than both of us combined. It's historically protected and perfectly healthy. There's no situation to discuss." Her smile tightened. "History is wonderful, James, but progress is inevitable. That tree is a liability. One strong storm and..." She snapped her fingers. "Catastrophe." I felt my lawyer instincts kick in. I've had it professionally assessed. "It's healthier than most trees half its age." "We'll see about that," she replied, turning on her heel. "The HOA board meeting is next week. I suggest you attend." That night, as Sarah and I sat on our back patio, watching the sunset paint our oak's leaves in shades of gold, we knew this was just the beginning. The soft creaking of branches in the wind sounded like whispered warnings, and the shadows cast by our string lights danced across the grass like nature's own protest. "She's not going to stop, is she?" Sarah asked, leaning her head on my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, feeling the weight of what was coming. "No, she's not. But neither are we." Little did we know then just how far Patricia would go in her crusade against our tree, or how much we would risk to protect it. Patricia's campaign against our oak tree started slowly, like poison seeping into soil. First came the whispers. I'd catch fragments of conversations as neighbors walked past our house. Dangerous, liability, property values. All Patricia's carefully planted seeds of doubt. But it was the photos that made my blood boil. One morning, I found them stuffed in every mailbox on our street. Close-up shots of our oak's bark with red circles around perfectly normal growth patterns, but labeled as signs of decay. At the bottom of each photo, "Are your children safe playing near this hazard?" "She's really outdone herself this time," Sarah said, examining one of the photos. Her photographer's eye caught what others might miss. These are deliberately shot at angles to make natural features look threatening. Classic manipulation. I called Marcus, my go-to arborist, the same day. He'd been caring for heritage trees in Denver for 30 years, and I trusted him implicitly. As he examined our oak, Patricia happened to walk by, phone in hand, recording everything. Well, I asked Marcus, aware of our unwanted audience. He smiled, patting the trunk. "This tree is healthier than most people I know. Look at these leaf clusters, the branch structure, it's textbook perfect. You've got at least another century in this beauty." I made sure to get his assessment in writing, complete with dated photos and his professional credentials. Something told me we'd need it. The next HOA meeting was where Patricia made her big move. The community center was packed. Unusual for a monthly meeting that typically drew 5 people and a plate of stale cookies. Patricia stood at the podium, laser pointer in hand, projecting massive images of fallen trees and crushed houses onto the wall. "This could be your home," she declared, clicking through her disaster slideshow. "The Mitchell's oak tree is a lawsuit waiting to happen. As your HOA president, I cannot in good conscience allow this threat to continue." I stood up, Marcus's report in hand. "None of those photos are of our tree, Patricia. In fact, they're not even from Colorado. The metadata shows they're stock photos from Florida after a hurricane." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Patricia's perfectly manicured nails tightened around her pointer. "Furthermore," I continued, "our oak is protected under Denver's Heritage Tree Ordinance. Any attempt to remove it without proper cause and permits would be a criminal offense. Laws can be changed," Patricia snapped, "especially when public safety is at risk." That's when Dave and Linda, our next-door neighbors, stood up. They'd lived here for 20 years, their kitchen window looking directly at our oak. "That tree's been here since before any of us," Dave said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "My kids grew up climbing it. Never had a problem. Heck, it's the reason we bought our house. Best shade in the neighborhood." Patricia's face tightened, but she wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, she escalated her tactics. Anonymous complaints about our trees started flooding the city's maintenance department. Our mailbox filled with printouts of obscure municipal codes, each highlighted and annotated in Patricia's distinctive purple ink. Then came the expert evaluations. Every few days, a new certified arborist would appear in our yard, hired by the HOA. None could produce proper credentials, and all coincidentally found severe problems with our oak. "She's getting desperate," Sarah observed one evening, sorting through the latest batch of threatening letters. "Look at these signatures. They're all clearly written by the same person." I was about to respond when a notification pinged on my phone. It was from our security camera, showing a figure moving around our oak in the growing dusk. We rushed to the window just in time to see Patricia herself, pressing something into the tree's bark. Under the porch light, we discovered copper nails driven into our oak's trunk, an old-school method of slowly poisoning a tree. I carefully photographed and removed each one, my hands shaking with rage. "She's not going to stop," Sarah whispered, echoing our conversation from weeks ago. But now her voice carried something else, fear. I pulled her close, feeling her tears dampen my shirt. "No, she's not. But she just crossed a line from harassment into criminal territory." What I didn't know then was that Patricia had an even more drastic plan in motion, one that would shake our peaceful neighborhood to its roots and change everything forever. The sound of chainsaws ripped through my morning meditation like a nightmare coming to life. Sarah burst into our bedroom, her face ghost white. "James, they're here." I was out the door before she finished speaking, still in my pajamas, bare feet pounding across the dewy grass. The scene in our backyard made my heart stop. 3 men in orange vests, chainsaws biting into our oak's massive trunk. Patricia stood off to the side, arms crossed, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. "Stop!" My voice thundered across the yard. The workers paused, looking uncertainly between me and Patricia. "This is private property, and that's a protected tree. What you're doing is illegal. Show him the paperwork." Patricia commanded one of the workers, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. The man fumbled in his pocket, producing a crumpled document. I snatched it, my legal training kicking in instantly. "This is forged," I said, pointing to the signature. "That's not the city arborist's signature. I work with him regularly. Plus, you need homeowner consent for any tree removal. It's a public safety emergency," Patricia declared. "The HOA bylaws clearly state, the HOA bylaws don't override state law or property rights," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "I'm calling the police." That's when we heard it, a deep, sickening crack from within the oak. The workers had already cut through a third of the trunk, right at the base. My heart froze as I realized what was about to happen. "Everyone move!" I shouted, grabbing Sarah and pulling her toward the house. The workers scattered, their equipment abandoned. Even Patricia's smug expression faltered as the cracking grew louder. Time seemed to slow down as our magnificent oak began its final descent. 180 years of history, countless stories, and infinite memories, all surrendering to gravity in a matter of seconds. The massive branches reached toward the sky one last time before the giant fell. Crash! The impact shook the ground like a small earthquake. When the dust settled, we saw where fate had decided to land its punch. Right across Patricia's brand new Range Rover, parked strategically at the edge of our property. The SUV's roof had crumpled like aluminum foil under the oak's massive trunk. Patricia's scream could have shattered windows. My car, my $60,000 car, she whirled on me, pointing a trembling finger. "This is your fault. You'll pay for this." "No, Patricia." Sarah stepped forward, her photographer's instincts already in action as she documented everything with her professional camera. "This is your fault. You hired these men to illegally cut down our tree. We have it all on video." As if on cue, neighbors began emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Phones came out, recording everything. Dave and Linda rushed over, already dialing the police. The tree removal workers looked terrified. "Lady," one of them addressed Patricia, "you told us you had all the proper permits. We don't want any part of this." They quickly packed up their remaining equipment and fled, leaving Patricia alone to face the growing crowd. The police arrived within minutes, followed closely by a representative from the city's Parks and Recreation Department. As they interviewed witnesses and took statements, I walked over to our fallen oak. Sarah joined me, tears streaming down her face as she placed her hand on the exposed rings of the trunk. "Look at this," she whispered, tracing the circles. Each ring a year of history. Civil War, World Wars, the Great Depression, all recorded right here. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, my own eyes stinging. "We'll make sure its story isn't forgotten." Behind us, we could hear Patricia ranting to the police, her voice rising hysterically. "They're responsible. Their tree destroyed my car. I want them arrested." The lead officer looked exhausted already. "Ma'am, based on multiple witness statements and video evidence, you're the one facing serious charges. Trespassing, vandalism, destruction of protected property." I turned back to our oak, tuning out Patricia's continued protests. The morning sun filtered through the fallen branches, creating dappled shadows on the ground. One final light show from our beloved tree. But as I watched Patricia being escorted to a police car for further questioning, I knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a legal battle that would expose far more than just one woman's vendetta against a tree. The courtroom fell silent as Patricia's email appeared on the large display screen. Find someone who will say what we need them to say about that tree. Money is no object. I want it gone before spring, dated 3 months before the incident. It was the smoking gun we'd been waiting for. I glanced at Sarah in the front row, who gave me a slight nod. After 6 grueling months of legal battles, Patricia's carefully constructed facade was finally crumbling. She had sued us for $60,000 for her car, claiming our negligence in maintaining the tree caused its fall. Her lawsuit backfired spectacularly. Our countersuit had revealed a pattern of corruption that stretched back years. The discovery process had been particularly illuminating. Patricia hadn't just forged documents for our tree. She'd been falsifying HOA records, pocketing fines, and using her position to harass anyone who dared challenge her authority. Your Honor, I addressed the judge, my voice steady. This email proves premeditation. Ms. Henderson didn't just impulsively decide to cut down our heritage oak. She planned it, orchestrated it, and then tried to blame us when her illegal actions resulted in the destruction of her vehicle. Patricia's attorneys shifted uncomfortably. They had already tried to sell out of court twice, but Sarah and I refused. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about justice, not just for our tree, but for our entire community. The testimony that followed was devastating. The tree removal workers admitted Patricia had promised to make it worth their while, to ignore permit requirements. 3 former HOA board members testified about her pattern of intimidation and rule-bending. But the most damaging testimony came from Marcus, our arborist. The oak was worth approximately $200,000, he explained, displaying his detailed assessment. This factors in its age, size, historical significance, and perfect health prior to the unauthorized cutting. But its true value to the community was immeasurable. When Patricia took the stand, her designer outfit couldn't hide her nervous fidgeting. Under cross-examination, her story unraveled completely. Yes, I hired the tree removal company, she finally admitted, but that tree was reducing property values. I was protecting our neighborhood's interests. By breaking the law, my co-counsel asked, "Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands," Patricia snapped, her mask of civility slipping. That tree was an eyesore. It didn't fit my vision for the community. The judge's ruling was comprehensive. Patricia was ordered to pay $200,000 for the tree, $50,000 in punitive damages, and all legal fees. She was permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in the state of Colorado. The criminal charges for property destruction and forgery would be handled separately. But the victory felt hollow as Sarah and I stood in our backyard that evening, staring at the space where our oak had stood. The stump remained, its rings telling stories we'd never hear again. "I have an idea," Sarah said softly, pulling out her camera. She showed me a series of photographs she'd taken of the oak over the years. Morning light through its leaves, winter snow on its branches, children playing beneath its canopy. We create a memorial, not just for our tree, but for everything it stood for. That's exactly what we did. We used part of the settlement money to create a community garden around the stump, which we preserved as a natural table. We planted 3 young oak saplings, positioned so that in a century or more, they would grow to form a natural cathedral. The day we opened the garden, nearly the entire neighborhood showed up. Dave and Linda brought their grandchildren. Marcus came with native flower seedlings. Even some of the HOA board members attended, expressing their commitment to protecting the neighborhood's natural heritage. As I watched children placing painted rocks around the stump, each one bearing a message or wish for the future, I realized something profound. Patricia had tried to destroy something beautiful because she couldn't control it. But in doing so, she had brought our community together in ways the tree itself never could. Sarah squeezed my hand as we watched the sunset paint the new saplings in gold. "Look," she whispered, pointing to a pair of cardinals building a nest in one of them. Life finds a way. I smiled, thinking of the long arc of history, of trees and humans and the stories we share. Patricia had taught us all an expensive lesson. Some things are worth fighting for, even if you lose them in the battle. Because sometimes, from the ashes of destruction, something even more beautiful can grow.